I used to deliver for Uber Eats. I was having trouble paying off my student loans, so I was hustling to make whatever cash I could. I still lived with my parents at the time. It was late at night, and I was picking up an order from some fast food place in Wilmington, North Carolina, and delivering to a house about 20 minutes away. I often did late-night deliveries in Uber rides because the pay was higher and I could bang out more deliveries and rides without traffic. I was already en route to the address, leaving the more populated residential area of Wilmington and heading in the direction of the quieter part with all the forest and farms. Most of the roads over there were pitch black and devoid of any other cars at that late hour of the night. I turned off the main road onto a side road with a dead-end sign. This was the road the directions were taking me where the address was. I was brought to the last house on this road. The lights to almost every little house on the stretch were off. It was just pitch black, even the house that I was supposed to be delivering the food to. I had to keep my car headlights on just to see and so I wouldn't trip on anything. I was also using my flashlight on my phone to navigate my way to the porch of this house. I'm not lying when I say there was not a single light on. I even felt the overgrown grass rubbing on my shins as I walked to the front door. This didn't feel right. I pressed the doorbell button but didn't hear a ring, so I knocked. The customer had their delivery preference set to contact delivery, which means I'd have to actually physically hand it off to him or her. I messaged the customer that I was at the front door and asked him if he could confirm the address. He read it right away and responded, "Give me a second." I replied, "Okay." He read it. I waited in the dark, looking at the windows of the house, waiting for a light inside to turn on. I was thinking there's no way this is the right house. I followed up again, asking him if he could type out his address. He started typing. It took a while before he sent a message saying, "I see you. You're at the right house." The next thing I realized was that there were no cars anywhere. This was making no sense. I asked the customer to confirm what kind of car he sees outside. He replied that he sees my light. Well, that pretty much confirmed that I was at the correct address, but it didn't make this any less sketchy. I started to just inch away from the door of the house, just because I didn't want to be on top of it as they opened the door, but the door never opened. No matter how many times I messaged the customer on the Uber Eats app, I was starting to suspect this was some kind of scam to get free food. Then I heard a voice come from outside in the darkness surrounding me. It was a male's voice calling, "Over here." I started to wave my flashlight all over the place, trying to reveal whoever just said that. I said out loud, "I'm leaving the food on the front porch over here." I didn't know who I was talking to, nor could I see them. I was terrified I was about to be attacked, so I walked back to my car, not trying to draw attention by running. When I got to my car, I heard this distinct air-leaking sound that I could immediately recognize as the sound of air leaking from a slashed tire. I took a look and saw that both the tires on the left side of the car were slashed and leaking air. I could only assume in the moment that the two tires on the right side had also been slashed. I got into the car and locked the doors. First thing, all four tires showed low tire pressure warnings on the dash. Panic started to set in. I was deciding on whether to call the police and wait in the car or make a run for it into the dark to a nearby house. I was about to pick the second option. I turned off the headlights on my car and was about to get out of the car, but I noticed someone standing outside my window. I screamed my soul out, and then I realized that there were at least 4 people standing outside of my car, one at every window. They all had on masks covering their faces. I was surrounded. One of them yelled at me to get out of the car now. I didn't know if one of them had a gun or not, and I knew that if they did, by the time I turned on the car and attempt to drive away with 4 flats, I'd have been shot dead already. I yelled through the window asking if they were just looking to rob me, and one of them said if I gave them everything on me, they'd let me go. I agreed to do so and unlocked the door. The second I did, the guy outside my door opened it and forcefully pulled me out. At this point, I was beaten and kicked by at least 3 of the guys. They grabbed everything off of me, my smartwatch, my shoes, my wallet, my phone, and even some things out of my glove compartment in my car. I was left on the ground as however many men there actually were ran away into the darkness, and I was alone that I blacked out from here, and the next thing I remember is waking up, probably half an hour later, still lying on the grass next to my car. They'd stolen even my keys. I managed to get up and navigate myself to the nearest source of light I could find in the distance, which was a small house all the way up the street closer to the main road. I rang the bell a few times until someone answered through the closed door. I said I'd been injured and robbed and needed to use a phone. Luckily, the woman was willing to help and allowed me to use a phone to call the police and then to call roadside assistance to have my car towed. Lastly, I called my dad. After the police showed up, I was taken back to my car, and they did a short investigation and took as much information as I could give them. After my car was towed away, my dad came to pick me up and bring me home. We left after my car was towed away. My phone's last location was down the street from the incident, and it hadn't been turned on since the night before, meaning they probably destroyed the phone. The next day, I gave even more information to some detectives regarding my Uber Eats account, and they were rather quickly able to trace the customer account back to a guy named Logan who, long story short, allegedly lost his phone and wallet. Whoever found or stole them was the one to call the Uber Eats delivery with the intention of robbing me. Basically, what I'm saying is whoever did this to me got away with it. The house that they set this up at was a vacant house for sale. My car tires were covered by insurance, but everything else, I ate the loss. This was a painful and expensive but also valuable lesson to not be so naive ever again in a situation like that. I stopped deliveries for a few months, then I went back to doing daytime deliveries. I signed up for Uber Eats back when it was really gaining traction in 2021. I'd just gotten laid off from my previous job, and it seemed nearly impossible to find any other job quickly, so this was a bit of a risk that I hoped would work out. A couple of months in, I was enjoying it enough, and it was paying me enough for me to keep with it. This happened just around a year after I started. I'd fallen into the habit of waking up late and staying up late, so I hadn't started working until around dinner time. By 11 p.m., I still hadn't made enough to be good for the night, so I continued on, taking pretty much any order that popped up. It was at 1 a.m. when an order came through that was interesting. It was a grocery order from a 24-hour 7-Eleven gas station. I still accepted it, but it was just odd to me that someone would need groceries from a gas station in the middle of the night. I drove up and parked at the mostly empty gas station and went into the convenience store. The only person inside was a kind old man working at the register. I picked up the bag from him and also got myself a cup of coffee for the road, then headed back to my car. I got in and situated myself before backing out and getting on the road for the final stretch of the drive. Only a moment after getting onto the main street, though, I noticed a car's headlights right behind me. Mind you, this was very late, and almost no cars were out, so I was sure I would have seen them before they were so close. After some thinking, I thought they must have been at the gas station, maybe parked on the side of the building and pulled out as soon as I did. I drove along this same road for a while, reaching the edge of town, when I suddenly felt something wrong with my car. It was way bumpier than usual, and a loud kind of scraping sound was coming from the right side. After a minute from noticing this, it became a lot worse, so bad that I had to pull off to the side before the car would break down in the road. I parked on the shoulder with woods on either side of me, but in the mirror, I saw the headlights of that same car slowing down and pulling in right behind me. Unsure what was going on, I decided to get out quickly and see what the problem was. I didn't know if the car behind me was going to try and help me out or if they had something else in mind, but I knew I couldn't go anywhere until I figured this out. I ran around to the other side of my car and quickly noticed the problem. My right tire was completely flattened, which was crazy. I hadn't run over anything, and usually, flat tires happen gradually, not so suddenly like this. I took a closer look, seeing a gash right on the side of the tire that didn't look natural at all. Then I heard a door open from the car behind me. A man stepped out and waved at me. "I'm okay, thank you," I called out, trying to get them to leave before even approaching, especially after realizing this was all really sketchy. But the man kept walking toward me. Once he got maybe 10 feet away, I could see him more clearly. He was older, with long gray and black hair and a bushy, untamed beard. He wore basic clothes, jeans and a hoodie, but they were covered in stains and grime. He came up next to my car and asked if he could help me out, showing a large smile. I said again that I was okay, but he only laughed, looking at my tire and back at me. A few seconds of awkward silence passed as the man held his smile before I lied and said I had a friend on his way to pick me up. Now, having rejected his help 3 times, the man's smile gradually fell into a straight face. He turned his body toward the car and very unnaturally looked around. This is when I got the immediate rush through my body to get away from this man, and I only had one option to do so. I bolted off the road into the tree line, hearing the man follow me into the pitch-black woods. It only lasted for a few seconds before I lost him. After that, I didn't go very far at all, still able to see the headlights on the road, and I could make out the man's figure moving around by the cars. A few minutes later, he got in his car and left. By now, I'd had enough time to pretty much figure out that this was all a setup from the Uber Eats order, having been followed from the gas station where he likely slashed my tire. However, I didn't think it would be so easy to catch him. His full name and everything on the app turned out to be real. I guess he didn't think that we would tie it all back to the Uber Eats order. That being said, the punishment wasn't very harsh because he didn't harm me. He only stole some things from my car, though I'm sure that if I had stayed there on the road, I might not even be here to share this story. It was supposed to be one of, if not the last, delivery of the night for me. I was working at this pizzeria called Leonardo's. One of my bosses, John, was on the night shift with me. He would choose who does what delivery. We got an order for a couple of regular pizzas. He gave me a piece of paper with the address on it and the person's phone number. This was in 2009. I didn't have a cell phone with GPS, just a bare-bones flip phone. I also didn't have one of those Garmin GPS devices. I still had to use an old-school book of maps to find my way around when doing deliveries. The name of the street for this house I was delivering to was something along the lines of Willows Road. I can't remember the house number, nor do I remember the name given for the order, but I do remember having the hardest time finding the place. It was in this really rural town with nothing but woods, farmland, and more woods. The lack of street lights also didn't help. I had to pull over a few times and turn on the interior lights as I checked the map again. It was a very stress-inducing situation. Whenever I couldn't find a house, I was on a very quiet, dark, and confusing road when I decided to just call the number on the paper my boss gave me. The phone rang a bunch of times. It seemed that there was no answering machine set up. It had to have rung about 10 times before someone picked up. I waited for someone to say hello. When no one did, I said it, and then a voice on the other end said it back. It was a low, deep, yet soft voice. I said, "This is the pizza guy. I'm just having a hard time finding your place." He explained that his driveway was easy to miss and looked like just a dirt trail. He talked in a very slow, monotone voice as he described the surroundings of his driveway to help me find it, and eventually, I did. I turned my car onto this pretty narrow dirt path. It was definitely easy to miss. It took about 30 seconds of me driving slowly and carefully up it until I saw this small one-story house come into view. There was a faint orange glow from inside the house that could be seen through one of the windows. I parked my car next to the only other vehicle in sight, this beat-up pickup truck. I grabbed the 2 pizzas from the passenger seat and walked to the front door of the house. I looked for a doorbell but couldn't find one, so I knocked on the door. I heard muffled music from inside the house, then I heard footsteps approaching the door. After maybe 10 seconds, the door cracked open, and I saw a quarter of someone's face. I literally could just see one of their eyes peeking out at me. I nervously said, "Hey, you ordered the pizza, right?" The guy said, "Oh yes, the pizza." I recognized the voice from the phone call before. There was a weird pause. I didn't know what to say except for, "Do you have the cash?" He said yes and let me go get it. He walked away from the door, and I heard his footsteps move to another room. There was super old music from the 1930s playing, making the setting just extra creepy and weird. If it weren't creepy enough already, the door started slowly inching open on its own, revealing more and more of this dimly lit room. Everything about the interior of this place seemed super old. There were metal sheets on the floor, presumably covering holes in the floor. The couch looked like it was from a different century. Hell, all the furniture did, and the music was coming from a vintage-looking record player, one of those with the big horn-like thing on top. That's all I could see at first from just sneaking a nosy peek inside the place, but what really was off-putting was the smell. It smelled like death in there. I waited respectfully for the guy to come back with the money from wherever he went. When enough time passed that I felt like it was getting weird, I knocked on the open door, took a peek inside, and said, "Sir." The man's voice came from another room, saying, "Yes." "Would you mind coming into the kitchen, please?" My coworkers and bosses always advised against stepping into anyone's house if you didn't have to. That advice seemed especially relevant for this circumstance. I heard what the man said, but I still responded, "Can you repeat that?" He repeated, "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" I stepped inside and I honestly felt like my feet were going to crash through the floor. The place was so old that the floor actually caved in a bit as I stepped around. The house was very linear. I looked to the right and saw the entrance to the kitchen where his voice was coming from. I looked to the left, and there was a narrow hallway with a bunch of doors on the right side. At the end of the hallway, there was this guy with his back to me, slowly dancing in the creepiest way imaginable. The man was feeling himself. I don't mean he felt confident. I mean he was literally feeling his body as he moved in this really off-putting way. In any other circumstance, I would have laughed, but I was downright disturbed by the kind of house I had just walked into. I turned away and looked toward the kitchen, still holding these 2 pizza boxes. I took a few steps toward the kitchen before I even noticed the person peering around the edge of the wall separating the kitchen from the living room. It was that man's face again, still only showing like a quarter of his face, just one of his eyes creepily peering at me. The only thoughts I had in this moment were, what the hell, and should I just leave? Leave, I repeated what I said at the front door moments ago, asking him again if he had the cash. The man didn't respond. He started to just giggle, or I don't even know what I'd call it because the laugh was so deep and pitchy, but it was so subtle and soft. Then he called out, "Randall," in a startlingly loud voice, much louder and more commanding in tone than his previous soft-spoken monotone voice. I was at my limit of how much weirdness I could take. I turned around and started walking back to the front door. As I took a look down the hallway, as I was about to walk outside, I noticed that the guy who was dancing seconds ago was now simply just standing there, looking back at me. I left through the front door and closed it behind me. I hurried back to the car, for some reason still holding the pizzas. I threw the pizza boxes in the passenger seat and got back in the car as quickly as possible. As I was backing my car up to clear the pickup truck next to it so that I could do a three-point turn, I looked back at the house. The door was fully open again. My heart started beating even quicker at the thought that one of them was outside my car, about to attempt to open one of the doors. Maybe they were, and I'll never know, but I managed to get my car down that dirt driveway and back onto the road. I had to return to the pizzeria. I called John to let him know what happened. He wasn't mad at me. When I got back to the pizzeria, everyone left. When I told them what happened, I can honestly see how it sounds like a funny situation when explaining it to others, but it was not funny in the moment. Whatever was going on in that house wasn't normal, and I don't think they had any intentions of buying pizza. I've had multiple dreams where I would see that man's face just peeking around from behind a wall. After that, I didn't enter anyone's houses or apartments while doing deliveries. I used to deliver Chinese food for a local restaurant. I was just a teenager in high school at the time, and whatever job I got wasn't going to be for more than a year or two. I'd say this job was fairly typical to most first jobs or retail and food service jobs because it had some slow and boring days and some busy and stressful days. As the delivery driver, though, I was always thankful to not have to be working in the store and dealing with mobs of customers. On this night, I started at 6 p.m. It was a Friday, so I was working a late 6 to 12 shift. As soon as I clocked in, I was delivering orders non-stop for the next 2 hours, with no time to breathe in between them. At 8, orders were slowing a bit, but I still had a few more to deliver before I could take my lunch. So I grabbed the 3 orders and set out to get them done before 9. The first one was close, but the next 2 were further out. This isn't uncommon, as our town isn't all packed together. I got to the second house and dropped it off, then headed out to the final stop. It was 10 minutes from where I was, and the tag said it wasn't paid for yet. All I was thinking about during this drive was the break I'd get afterward. Going back and forth for 3 hours straight tired me out more than usual this night. I pulled into the neighborhood and followed the GPS until I got to a back portion where the whole atmosphere quickly changed. I turned down a thin road of cracked pavement and potholes with barely visible small houses on the side, covered by the thick bushes and unkempt lawns. When the GPS told me I'd arrived, I stopped the car but didn't see a house. I turned my brights on, and ever so faintly, I could see the outline of a small house pretty far from the road I was on. I then looked at the grass leading up to it and realized there was actually a driveway. It was just engulfed in vines and tall grass. I would never have seen it if I hadn't seen the house first. Knowing I would be unable to even drive on it, I put the car in park, got out with the bag, and began to walk through the overgrown driveway. I couldn't believe how awful it was to walk through, and I couldn't imagine anyone letting their driveway get to this point. Getting closer, though, I could see more of the house. It was very small, kind of like a trailer home, and looked to be in a matching condition to the driveway, with vines growing over the windows and bushes covering every inch of the nearly decaying house. As I made my way up to the front door, I knew something was wrong. I knew it in my gut and in my head, but I was just some kid with a first job that was scared to lose it, so I felt like I had to do my job, which was to deliver the order to this address. I pushed all my bad feelings aside and knocked on the door. Right away, I heard footsteps coming up to the door. It opened, revealing a young lady behind it. At first, in the dim lighting, she looked very normal, and I felt a huge relief. But it only took a few more seconds to realize that her normal look was eerily out of place with the house in this condition. There was no way she could be so well-dressed and taken care of. As these thoughts scrambled through my head, she opened the screen door and said in a creepily calm tone, "Come in." Everything hit me in that moment as I stumbled back a few steps and decided that I needed to leave right away. I turned around, and only a second after beginning to leave, I heard a thud from the side of the house. I looked over, seeing two men running out from behind the house and sprinting through the bushes toward me. I dropped everything and started running. I did everything I could to get through the thick grass and vines, but just as I reached the end of the driveway, I stumbled to the ground, tripping over something. I hurried up, hearing their footsteps closing the distance on me. I couldn't even get myself to look back as I ran straight to my car, turning it on. The men immediately stopped and ran back to where they came from. With my whole body still shaking from the adrenaline, I turned the car around and drove away. Of course, I let my boss know what happened, and he urged me to call the police and report it. I was really relieved to know he didn't care about the order and only for my safety, which, looking back on it, would have been horrible if it were any other way. Police interviewed me and my boss and did a whole investigation, ultimately unable to find any of the people. The property I was on, though, was actually state-owned, and the trespassing sign at the beginning of the road had been dug up and thrown into the tall grass. Their intentions are unknown, but it seems like the most obvious possibility is the answer. I just hope nobody else has to go through what I did, or if they do, I hope they can be as lucky as I was to get away. I had some spare time this night, and having chugged a few coffees earlier in the day, I figured I'd use this energy to go out and make some money. I was delivering for DoorDash, cruising on the highway to my next delivery. It was super late, the roads were empty and the night was very peaceful, basically every delivery driver's dream. On my way there, though, my phone started buzzing. It was the customer calling me, but before I had a chance to answer it, they hung up. Since it only rang for a couple of seconds, I thought it must have been an accident. But in case it was not, I redialed their number. It rang for a while, but they didn't answer. I shook my head and blew it off, not thinking about it for the rest of the drive. I got off the highway and drove into the neighborhood. It was a very regular street with average houses. When I got up to the house my delivery was for, I parked right in the driveway and started walking up to their porch. As I was setting down the bag, I saw that the front door was cracked open. I didn't know if it was meant for me or not, so I just lightly knocked on the door and called out that I was dropping off their food. As soon as I did, I heard a somewhat disturbing sound come from down the hallway. It was a muffled thump that almost mimicked my knocking, like someone was banging on a door. A bit shaken, I opened the front door wider and called out again. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just repeated myself, saying that I was delivering their food. A few quiet moments went by, then I heard a door open from the back of the house, and a guy came around the corner. He looked distressed and bothered, but I couldn't tell if it was because of me or something else. The guy walked down the hall and right up to the doorway I was in, not saying a word as he started to reach for the bag. But that's when I heard those thumps again from down the hallway. I looked past him in confusion as he turned and looked as well, then quickly turned back and looked at me, recognizing that I heard it too. "Is everything okay?" I asked carefully. The sound echoed through the walls again as the man just kind of stared at me, as if he were trying to think of what to do. "Why don't you bring the food inside for me?" he said, almost in a demanding tone. Nervously, I picked up the bag but quickly realized how terrible of an idea this was. I felt threatened, like I had to follow him, but I also had a feeling that if I did, I wouldn't be making it out of there. In my hesitation, the guy's face showed he was even more bothered, angry even. He then reached out and grabbed the food right from my hands, then slammed the door in my face. Stunned, I stood there and listened as his footsteps went down the hallway and the thumping stopped. I couldn't do anything else at this point, so I hurried off the porch and got back to my car. I ended my DoorDash shift after that one and ended up reporting the really disturbing scenario to the police. I think what ended up making me report it was that the man tried to get me to go inside his house. If not for that, I may have not felt there was enough evidence to do anything. Unfortunately, though, police informed me hours later that the man denied that anyone else was there and declined their request to search his home. At that point, there was nothing left to do other than speculate. I believe there was something truly horrible going on, and he was possibly ready to do the same to me, but I don't think we'll ever know for sure. I'm currently 25 years old, although at the time of the story, I was 20. I live in Newark, Delaware, a usually small and quiet town that is until college season rolls around in the fall and spring. Newark is home to the University of Delaware, which is a large and widely respected school in the U.S. It also has a reputation for being a big party school, so when the college kids arrive, things get a lot more lively. Anyway, I work as a bicycle delivery guy at Jimmy John's, a job I still work at as of me telling this story. This event took place during a Tuesday or Wednesday night in the spring, either late April or early May, I can't remember exactly. It was my typical 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. The Jimmy John's I work at is open until 2 on weekdays and 3 on weekends. This means we're one of the few places still open in town aside from the bars, so a lot of drunk college kids storm the place wanting to order. Needless to say, it gets pretty hectic. Deliveries would pop up like crazy, which did get very annoying, but it meant a lot of tips, so I always put up with it. This was my last night working the shift, and just as 2 a.m. was about to roll around, one last delivery came in, and I was next in line to take it. This annoyed me, as I just wanted to end my shift and go home to get some sleep. I sucked it up and took the delivery since I didn't have a choice. I knew the street by heart and knew where to go immediately. I should mention that the reason we do bicycle deliveries is that the roads tend to be busy sometimes during college season, so using bicycles sometimes allows us to do deliveries faster. I rode my bike as fast as I could to the house in less than 10 minutes. I knocked on the door loudly, but there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, still nothing. I became a little pissed when I remembered if someone didn't come out, I'd have to take the order back to the store, meaning this delivery would seriously be wasting my time. I called the number on the receipt, but no one answered. I was getting ready to call the store when I first heard it, rustling sounds coming from some bushes directly across the street from me. I figured it was probably the wind, but decided to look anyway. When I did, I felt my stomach drop as a strong sense of dread flowed through me. I saw the dark figure of a person directly across the street from me, in someone's yard, crouched behind a few bushes. Even though I couldn't make out any facial features, I knew that I figured it was he was looking right at me. My heart was racing, but it didn't seem like he noticed that I noticed him. I pretended to not notice him and knocked loudly on the door again. Still, there was no answer. I began to grow more and more panicked, wondering whether or not this could be a trap. I did a quick glance, and the person was still crouched behind the bushes, watching me. I just wanted to get the hell out of there, so I decided to just continuously knock on the door as loud as possible until someone answered. It felt like hours that I was knocking, but eventually, someone stumbled out from one of the rooms and sluggishly answered the door, sounding pissed. When I told him about the order, he told me that he didn't order, so it was probably his roommate instead. To my misfortune, the person who actually ordered was upstairs in his room, passed out drunk. How he could have passed out so quickly after he ordered is still beyond me. The guy went upstairs to try and get him. Not even a minute after he went upstairs, I suddenly heard more rustling and did a quick glance back. When I did, I noticed the man had moved a little closer, probably to get a better view of me. I could tell he was still watching me. My fear intensified. I almost wanted to come inside to get away from the man watching me, but I figured he'd steal my bike, meaning I couldn't do my job anymore. Plus, I didn't know if this person was armed and if he would actually try something if I went inside, which would put the two of them in harm's way. Luckily, he was only upstairs for a minute. He said his roommate's door was locked and that he wouldn't answer the door when he knocked. At this point, I really wanted to get out of there, so I told him he could sign for his roommate's order. He hesitated at first since there wasn't a tip charged to the order, but a tip was the last thing I was thinking about at this point. I insisted over and over, and eventually, he signed for his roommate. I handed it to him and gave him a quick thank you. When he shut the door, I hurried to my bike and hopped on, ready to get the hell out of there. But just as I put the kickstand up, I heard the man suddenly lunge out from behind the bushes. I quickly turned to my left and saw that the man was now dashing toward me. I was able to see he was wearing what looked like jeans, boots, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head, and what I think was some sort of mask on his face, as I could only see his eyes. Although I'm not 100% on this, it looked like he was holding a blade in one of his hands. I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't make a U-turn because he'd probably catch me before I could get away. To make matters worse, all the surrounding streets led to dead ends. My only chance was to head to a bike trail that was nearby. Even though it wasn't lit up and I didn't have a light on my bike, I knew it would be my only chance. I pedaled faster than I ever had before onto the pitch-black trail and rode it, all while looking out for shadows and listening for footsteps. Luckily, the trail wasn't long, and I knew it by heart. Still, I was extremely paranoid by this point and got startled whenever I heard any noise at all. I didn't see the man while I was on the trail, however, and I made it back to the store safely. I was hyperventilating like crazy as I tried to wrap my head around what the hell just happened. I didn't tell my boss or coworkers, nor did I call the police since I didn't get a good look at the man. I simply got my stuff and clocked out and went to my car, putting my bike in the trunk, so thankful I decided to drive that night. I made it home safe without anyone following me, and that was that. I never saw the man again. I don't know what he wanted, whether he wanted to rob me or worse. I haven't worked another midnight shift since then, and now I carry nunchucks on me whenever I do any kind of night shift. New York isn't known for being a dangerous town, so the fact that this happened here truly showed me that anything can happen anywhere to anyone at any time, no matter how safe or dangerous the area may be.